Hello comrades, welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, the quest for the final frontier. I'm Commie Fritz the Great, and we are continuing with our Ike mission to land this small space probe on the barren surface of Duna's moon in order to collect some scientific data before we land on Duna itself with the lander and space tug, which is in orbit around the planet. And you can see that in the last episode we began our descent onto the surface, and I'm just time warping now down to a suitable level when we can start our retrograde burn. Just slow down and gently touch down. Now I seem to have overestimated the amount of fuel that I needed to carry. You can see that the green bar next to the engine and the staging column on the left hand side of the screen is pretty much full, and I've barely used any getting out to Ike. Most of the fuel that I've used is in those 4 outer drop tanks that I put around the central stack of fuel tanks. This spacecraft is actually a modified moon rocket. Just the transfer stage and lander section, obviously. So you can see my method. You can see the method in my madness when I decided that it would be useful to use it to land on Ike, seeing as it was closer to Duna than the moon is to Kerbin. That's the one. And so as we start our retrograde burn, I think at this point that I've left it too late, because I can already see the ground scatter kicking in on the surface there. You can see the sparkling rocks littered around on the ground. So I just kick it up to full throttle and then hope that I don't crash, which is always a useful tactic to employ when you're not sure what you're doing. And then once I've slowed down, I can then just wait until I have to burn again. You can see that I burnt a bit too much. I'm still doing 275 meters per second, and I start to throttle up again. I'm just under 6 kilometers above the surface, and I realise that I may have left this too late. The ground is rushing up towards the Ike probe, and I don't know if we're going to survive this impact. So I turn around and burn upwards, and I can see the closing speed is pretty phenomenal. You can see the rocks zipping by there, and there's my shadow on the ground just to my left. We are really close now, but I'm going far too fast to make a landing, so I just point it retrograde and hold it there until it's safe to. And I'm going up again, so I point at the ground slightly. Check the amount of fuel in my drop tanks, and then ease it down to about 50 meters per second before slowly lifting the nose with the docking port on it straight up. And I burnt too much in my own panic. And I make a small correction. It was actually quite a tense descent when I actually did it, because I wasn't really sure about the lie of the land and the relief of the area which I was landing. So that was a pretty desperate kind of suicide burn that I had to do. But yes, we safely managed to get into a steady hover just above the surface, and at this point I make the decision not to land with the lander legs, rather just gently touch down on the surface like I'm doing here now, with the engine section that I'm using up now, because it would be a shame to waste all of this fuel just dumping it. So logically speaking, it's better to kind of preserve as much fuel as I can, because we do need some of this fuel in this tank to transfer, I think, across to the space tug, so that I have an extra bit of leeway on the way back. And I turn on the landing lights, and they are illuminating the surface quite well, meaning that I'm a couple of meters off the ground. I'm doing 5.2 meters per second. Still going a bit fast for a landing on that engine, so I just need to be a bit careful just to bleed off that extra velocity very slowly before I actually touch down. And here we are now, we are very close. The shadow is coming closer. It's right there. And touchdown. That was pretty much perfect, but I've got to make sure that I don't topple over like I'm doing now. And I don't have RCS, which makes this difficult, and it's tipping over again. The fine controls didn't help. I was using the fine controls on the reaction wheels to kind of balance things out. Right, let's do some science. One of the samples has reacted very strangely to the surface of Ike. Keep that data. Temperature scan. Log temperature. Collected and recorded the temperature from the environment. That's good. Materials bay. Observe the mystery goo. You observe the goo. Recovery 80 science. Transmit 42. Okay, I've got to get this back home now. And that's about all we can do on the surface. Right, so if I check my landing site, I am quite high in latitude, so I'm going to have to make quite large orbital corrections when I get up back into a trajectory around Ike. And I'm going to reset the staging so I can lose those drop tanks before I start up a lander engine, because that would be bad if we didn't, because we still have that engine burning. And as we leave the surface behind, we're climbing steadily up to 50 meters per second back into orbit. All is going very well as we fold in the landing legs. "90 meters per second, we're almost doing 100, and we've crossed the 100 marker. I've still got quite a lot of fuel left in those external drop tanks, so I'm gonna have to think about dropping them maybe when I'm doing my Duna transfer to rendezvous with the space tug. That seems like a sensible time to drop them. Although I don't know how much fuel I'm going to use up when I eventually get into Ike orbit. This is all just guesswork, really. You've just got to sort of keep your eye on the ball, both literally and metaphorically in the case of the nav ball. 40 units of fuel in those outer tanks. I may not make it into orbit with those. That doesn't really matter, as long as I can dock with the space tug before I run out of fuel. Right. Climbing really high. And we're going to throttle back up for our orbital insertion burn. You can see we're going pretty quickly. So we're going to point this down at the horizon because I don't want to gain any more altitude than I already have, because I don't need it, simply. And to do so would just be a waste of fuel. Right, apoapsis. We'll do the same thing again. I think this is going to be our final burn. This time I'm going to do it just gently. The engine is just simmering. And I can see Kerbal in the distance. These spaceship icons and the flags that I've planted are visible in the map view, which is always useful. Hopefully we'll be returning there in one piece. And we're here in Ike orbit. I'm just going to make a few corrections. Boost our periapsis. And that is fine and dandy for me. Okay. The next thing we need to worry about is our inclination, because that's quite a strange orientation to be in. So if we do it at right angles to the apoapsis and periapsis, we can then fiddle with things and sort things out as we go along, which is how we like to do things in KSP. 78.9 meters per second of delta V needed. Right, that's our maneuver adjusted. And we can time warp around until we reach our burn point. 5 minutes to go. We're on 100 times time warp. 16 seconds, and I'm going to start burning, because it's quite a short burn anyway. To 3.1 meters per second. Just gotta make some tiny little burns. 1.2. 1.1, and I think we can just cancel that. Let's have a look. Oh, not bad. Yes, we can just make another one later. Actually, we'll just get that over with now. Not a bit too much, and there we go. Right, that's only 35 meters per second. And I've slightly missed my window there. Actually, that's perfectly fine. We'll just burn a bit more and slightly adjust our nose. And very gently just finish off the burn. Lovely. And that's pretty much perfect. Right, next job on the to-do list is to rendezvous with the space tug, so we're going to have to transfer back into Duna orbit. Well, we are already in Duna orbit, but I mean, like, not in a tidally locked orbit, because we're orbiting around Ike, so it's not really an orbit around Duna, it's more something else. It's very complicated. I guess we could go for that, and then we can circularize later on. And I can probably bring my periapsis down a bit more. Let's keep going, and a bit up. Fiddle with things just to make things perfect. I want to do as little fuel burning as possible on this transfer, because I may have to use that to rendezvous with the lander. And as I said on the surface of Ike, I'd rather like to keep as much fuel in my tanks as possible for an emergency situation, shall we say. And we can time warp around to where we want to do our burn. It's pretty cool. Right. And Duna rises over the horizon of Ike. Which coincidentally is also the best time to burn, as it was on the way out. Although in that case it was Ike rising, obviously. And we can dump those drop tanks because they are completely out of fuel and they're totally useless, therefore. And we can continue on with our fully fueled central stack. Just make a few small corrections, and that's our burn done. Okay, you can see our predicted trajectory over there in the map view. It's looking pretty good. All we'll have to do when we get back into a circular orbit is change our inclination, I think. Although it's not as kind of wonky as I thought it was at first, which is always pretty useful. And we're reaching our periapsis now, our Duna periapsis. So I'm going to just find the retrograde marker on my navbar. I ended up at prograde for some reason, and there it is. I'm just going to turn on the SAS and lock it in there like that. Throttle right up. And just bring my apoapsis all the way in. Oh, that's not too bad, actually. That's really not too bad at all. But yeah, that concludes our Ike mission and our second episode in the 20-minute format. Much less for you to sit through, obviously. So, thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe below if you enjoyed the video. And I will see you next time on Kerbal Space Program.